and a very warm welcome. You are watching Race to Power with me, Molly Gambhir. We are starting off this edition with the latest from Nepal. Who will be the country's interim leader and what's happening on the ground right now after those protests have resulted in multiple deaths as well? We are telling you all about that. Also shifting focus to the United States, where activist Charlie Kirk has been shot dead, and the incident has reignited heated debates over multiple issues. Decoding that for you, all this and more coming up. After 3 days and 31 people dead, rage has somewhat eased in Nepal. In fact, the calm persisting on the streets of Kathmandu, the country is healing from that violence. The protesters, the army and the president now charting out a plan for an interim leadership. And the army is patrolling the streets of Kathmandu. The curfew has now been extended in major cities, with only brief morning and evening windows for essential movement. Nepal's president, meanwhile, has issued an appeal calling on the protesters to maintain calm and assuring a way out of the challenges within the country's constitutional framework. Nepal's army undertaking series of meetings with the Gen Z leaders and the country's president. The objective is to find an interim leader with consensus. But the so-called Gen Z movement is a leader less uprising. The delegation that is holding meetings consisting of different leaders, and after 2 rounds of talks, the consensus on the interim leader's name remains elusive. Different factions of protesters backing different people. The name that's been doing the rounds is that of Kulman Ghising. He's a former managing director of Nepal Electricity Authority. Earlier, another faction backed former Chief Justice Sushila Karki, who remains in talks and has expressed readiness to lead.
But right now, what I can say for now is we need a interim government for now, for which we have proposed Sushila Karki, because she was the Chief Justice and she has always been fighting for the corruption, against the corruption. That's why right now the first thing is the interim government. The second thing is dissolving the current parliament. And the third thing is maintaining law and order in the country. These are the things, 3 things that we are looking forward for now.
The protest that started after a social media ban soon turned into a platform against the country's ruling class. Houses of top leaders of all major political parties were torched. The elected leaders of major political parties sidelined. They are distancing themselves from the negotiation process, and the protesters are also calling for the dissolution of the parliament.
Some of the party members have the misconception that they can infiltrate and create a division. This bloodshed is because of you, old leaders. If people start the bloodshed, then they would not survive. We don't want bloodshed. We want to dissolve the parliament, but not to cancel the constitution.
In fact, Pushpa Kamal Dahal's Communist Party of Nepal, Sheh Bahadur Deoba's Nepali Congress, and KP Sharma Oli's Communist Party of Nepal Unified Marxist Leninists collectively hold nearly 3/4 of the seats in the parliament. The building that housed it, remember, is in ruins after protesters set it on fire. as elected leaders are out of the frame in a way and protesters are taking charge to carve out the future path. Let's now shift focus to the United States. Trump's close confidant and conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot dead. The incident reigniting the debates over radicalization, political polarization, gun violence, among other issues, and once again bringing these core issues to the center of the American political discourse. Kirk was a staunch defender of the Second Amendment, which grants U.S. citizens the right to bear arms. He was shot at a university campus event. Moments before being shot, he was answering a question about gun violence involving transgender people. His last words were, "Counting or not counting gang violence," quote unquote.
Counting or not counting gang violence? Great. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years? Counting or not counting gang violence? Great.
Emergency responders quickly rushed him to a nearby hospital in an attempt to save his life. But despite the efforts, he succumbed to his injuries. President Trump posted on Truth Social that Kirk had died. He was one of the key faces who helped Trump court youth voters in the 2024 election. In fact, from one university to another, he touched upon issues ranging from immigration, gender debate, and abortion.
My great fellow Americans, I am filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah. Charlie inspired millions, and tonight all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America.
In fact, Trump also ordered that the flag of the United States shall be flown at half-staff at the White House and upon all public buildings and grounds until sunset on September 14. World leaders across the political spectrum condemned the incident. Donald Trump called it a dark moment for America. His political opponent and former President Barack Obama called the incident a despicable act of violence. Joe Biden said there is no place for this kind of violence in America. From the UK, Conservative Reform UK Party leader echoing Trump, he called it a very dark day for American democracy. The UK Prime Minister said that there can be no justification for political violence. The Italian Prime Minister also condemned Kirk's assassination. She called it an atrocious act and a deep wound for democracy. America has a long history of political shootings. Several former presidents have faced assassination attempts in public. Some survived, some did not. The list of political shootings is long. When the leaders who have unparalleled security guarding them came under attack, and Charlie Kirk's killer remains at large. U.S. agencies, meanwhile, carrying out the hunt to nab the assassin. But his death, once again, putting the issue of gun violence at the forefront in the United States. Let's go straight across now to our correspondent Susan Teherani, who's been tracking those developments very closely. Susan, let's just first talk about the fact that this, of course, is an issue that should, many would say, remain in the forefront of U.S. political debates and even otherwise. But once again, this incident bringing the spotlight back on the issue of gun violence. Tell us more about the sentiment on the ground right now.
Yeah, the killing of Charlie Kirk really sent shockwaves, Molly, here across the United States. And while the issue of gun violence, of course, is very important, and legislation to pass stricter gun laws will always be at the forefront and is at the forefront, the main concern for many Americans is how dark of a day and times these are, that because of the political discourse and the political sentiments that people have, they resort to a violent act like this. Charlie Kirk wasn't a political figure, but he was very influential. He was very articulate. And he was practicing his free speech when this happened. And, if you look at what he was doing, he usually would go on campuses and just have civil debates with people that disagreed with him. And the sentiment now is that if we can't have free, public, civil conversations about our political beliefs and where we stand as a country without the fear of being shot or violence, then America is in a very, very dark place. And whether, as we saw on both sides of the aisle, those that do agree with him, those that didn't agree with him, I think there's a consensus that violence is never the way to shut down free speech. And that I think has taken center stage. And I think that's going to be the conversations that many are going to be having in the coming days. But of course, the issue of gun violence, and then more immediately how the suspect is still at large, is extremely unsettling right now.
Indeed. There's also been that question that's been on people's minds every time such an incident takes place, which unfortunately has become the norm in the United States, as to why, the lobby continues to have that kind of control and influence, and why America has not been able to shake off such an influence at all.
Yeah, that's a valid point, and it really does come down. Guns ultimately go down, the issue with guns, to state by state, and there are states and there are people in those states that really value their Second Amendment rights, the right to bear arms. America also has a very dire mental health problem, and these are, these red flag laws that have been put in place. It appears that they're just not working the way that they should, even in states like New York, which have very strict gun laws. And then there is the issue of electability. Goes back to, state by state, where politicians can only push for what their constituents want to a certain degree. And ultimately, when they go to Washington, how they vote is going to really impact how they get elected. And it's not just the gun lobby. The gun lobby is a lot of American people. They believe that they should have guns to defend themselves against those that have guns, that have them illegally or are mentally ill and will use them in an ill way. So the debate is very widespread. It's just as old as time. And it's hard to imagine that, in Washington, something like this would get resolved.
All right, leaving it there for the moment, Susan. Thanks very much. All right, switching gears for now. Tens of thousands of supporters of Turkey's main opposition party held a massive protest in Istanbul. This comes days after a court in Turkey ordered the opposition to replace the party's provincial chairman in Istanbul.
Meydanın yabancısı olmayan Partisi'nin Genel Başkanı Sayın Özgür Özel. Şunu hepimiz biliyoruz.
Thousands gathered in Istanbul chanting anti-Erdogan slogans and carrying banners against the judiciary, whom they accuse of siding with Erdogan's government.
Yani Türkiye'deki
We must stand together in the struggle for human liberation against the oppressive fascist methods of this palace regime in Turkey. Long live organized struggle.
yan yana gelmek zorunda.
The protests began after a court ruled last week that Özgür, the CHP's Istanbul provincial chairman, be replaced by a former deputy party leader. The CHP national leader, meanwhile, dismissed the ruling as null and void.
Şunu çok net gördüm.
I saw this very clearly. We all know this. Mayor Ekrem has committed a serious crime. Let's admit it. We cannot hide it from each other. His crime is defeating Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He didn't do it just once. He did it 4 times. He hasn't learned his lesson. He will commit the same crime again.
Recep Tayyip Erdoğan'ı yenmek.
The court order is the latest in a series of measures against the CHP, which began after its Istanbul mayor was arrested in March, triggering the largest protest in Turkey in a decade. Critics have accused President Erdogan of trying to muzzle the voice of the opposition, particularly the CHP and Imamoglu, who emerged as the biggest challenger to Erdogan. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appears to have solidified the status of his daughter, Kim Joo-ae, as his likely successor, according to South Korean spy agency. This after she accompanied the leader on his recent visit to China. Joo-ae avoided public spotlight and stayed at the North Korean embassy during the Beijing visit along with her father, Kim Jong-un. And according to a lawmaker on South Korea's Parliamentary Intelligence Committee, the overseas trip of Joo-ae with her father was enough to build a narrative as the regime's likely successor. If Kim Joo-ae does take over, it would not only mark a historic break from generations of male rule in North Korea, but could also challenge gender norms in the country. This, as North Korea is one of the world's most insular and deeply patriarchal societies, where political power has always been concentrated in the hands of male leaders. Another move, meanwhile, that garnered widespread attention during Kim Jong-un's Beijing visit was the usage of a special plane to transport garbage and the pair staying at the North Korean embassy. According to reports, North Korean officials were spotted wiping out traces in order to not expose biological information, reportedly, of Kim Jong-un and his daughter during the China trip. The North Korean leader embarked on an unprecedented trip to China last week, where he attended a massive Victory Day parade. Kim Jong-un's trip to China to attend the parade marked his debut in a multilateral gathering, where he also met the Russian president. The UK government has sacked its ambassador to Washington, Peter Mandelson, after fresh revelations of his close ties to Jeffrey Epstein. The fallout from his association with Epstein is now not just political embarrassment. One of the UK's top diplomatic posts has been directly impacted. The decision to sack Mandelson comes after leaked emails reportedly revealed the depth of Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. The British Foreign Office confirmed that Mandelson has been withdrawn from his post on the orders of the Prime Minister. The emails published in the Sun newspaper and confirmed by Mandelson's office have sparked political uproar. The messages exchanged revealed Mandelson offered support to Epstein as he faced charges of procuring a child for prostitution back in 2008. The most incriminating of the emails reads, I'm quoting, "Your friends stay with you and love you. Fight for early release," quote unquote. Demands growing now for Mandelson to face questioning in Washington, where Epstein's victims continue to push for accountability. In fact, his handwritten note calling Epstein, quote unquote, my best pal, resurfaced in a so-called birthday book released by US lawmakers. The revelation setting off a firestorm in the British Parliament. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, calling the details sickening and demanded Mandelson be fired immediately. Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey, meanwhile, urged a formal investigation into whether diplomatic codes had been breached. Labour MPs, meanwhile, privately criticized Prime Minister Starmer for appointing Mandelson, despite knowledge of his links to Epstein. The Prime Minister had defended Mandelson earlier this week itself, saying due process was followed when he was appointed. But today, under mounting pressure, 10 Downing Street moved to act. Quoting the British Prime Minister, Epstein was a despicable criminal. The ambassador has expressed deep regret for his association with him, quote unquote. Mandelson insisted he never witnessed wrongdoing. He described the scandal as like an albatross around my neck, quote unquote. In fact, the episode reigniting scrutiny of Epstein's extensive network, which included powerful figures in British and US politics. The UK government now faces calls to release all Mandelson-Epstein correspondence and more rigorous vetting of senior appointments. Shifting focus, Prime Minister Modi praised Mohan Bhagwat on his 75th birthday. Mohan Bhagwat is the head of the RSS, India's largest volunteer organization. Prime Minister Modi called Mohan Bhagwat a symbol of harmony and societal change. In a post on social media platform X, the Prime Minister lauded Mohan Bhagwat's leadership, describing him as a man of empathy, intellectual depth and continuity. The Prime Minister highlighted Mohan Bhagwat's role in guiding the RSS through changing times, during the time of crises like COVID-19 pandemic, and his efforts to connect with the young minds. The praise comes as the RSS approaches its centenary in September this year. Prime Minister Modi called Mohan Bhagwat a living example of India's ancient ideal of Vasudev Kutumbakam, which means the world is one family. The Prime Minister said Mohan Bhagwat has strengthened harmony, equality and fraternity in society. Mohan Bhagwat made his tenure one of the most transformative in the organization's 100-year journey. RSS is often touted as BJP's mothership. Both deny any role in each other's affairs, but the relations between ruling BJP and the RSS are hidden from no one. Prime Minister Modi himself, in fact, has been a part of the organization. He became an RSS regional organizer in 1978, overseeing activities in his home state of Gujarat. In a landmark move signaling a major political shift, Sri Lanka's parliament has voted overwhelmingly to abolish all state-sponsored perks for former presidents. The decision is a response to growing public demand for accountability and fiscal responsibility. In a resounding 151-1 vote, lawmakers stripped away privileges including state-funded housing, allowances, pensions, transportation and official staff. In fact, these benefits, long enjoyed by the country's 5 surviving former presidents and 1 presidential widow. The move fulfills a key election promise of the president who took office last year, coming to power by riding on a wave of public outrage following the country's worst ever economic crisis in 2022. And that crisis brought the country to a standstill with crippling shortages of food, fuel, medicine. It also led to the ouster of the then president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, following massive street demonstrations. This landmark decision coming just days after Rajapaksa's immediate successor, Ranil Wickremesinghe, was granted bail following his arrest on charges of misusing public funds during his tenure. On to Chile now, which held its first televised presidential debate ahead of the November 16 general elections.
Dijo que usted no respondió en ningún momento sobre el tema de los bots y si precisamente usted estaba...
In fact, the event highlighted the deep polarization and the ideological clash shaping the South American country's political landscape. The presidential contest has been dominated by far-right candidate and Communist Party nominee. They are leading in the polls. In fact, Cast, a veteran politician who lost to the current leftist president in the 2021 election, has built his campaign on a tough on crime and conservative platform. He is aiming to capitalize on public anxieties over rising crime and economic issues.
Chileans are concerned about much more serious issues. They are concerned about the security crisis, illegal immigration, the economic crisis, unemployment crisis, the crisis of lack of growth, the health crisis, the housing crisis, the education crisis.
And on the other side of the spectrum is a lawyer and former Labour Minister under the Boric administration. Her victory in the June primary election made her the candidate for the Unity for Chile coalition, and she has since gained traction in the polls.
In my particular case, the main issue I'm going to address with people tomorrow is the reality they live in, which is what is missing from this debate. What happens to them when they can't make ends meet? How do they experience anxiety and insecurity? How afraid are they of getting sick because they will fall into absolute poverty? So we are in a society in which those of us in politics are talking on one side and what people are experiencing is happening on the other.
With a crowded field of candidates and the two leading contenders representing opposite ends of the political spectrum, Chile's presidential election appears to be headed for a polarized contest. On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks for watching.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity,